All right, what I want to do is I want to plan out this program that we have. So the program we're looking at is we're making a guessing game. And our guessing game, we'll pick a random number between 0 and 100. We'll ask for the user to guess, and we'll tell them if they're high, low, or correct. And they'll repeat until they get it correct. So we want to kind of think of this in a flow chart format. So our program will start, and we'll initialize our variables. And so what we need is some random number between 1 and 100, 0 and 100 inclusive. We'll need the user's guess. And we're going to make what's called a sentinel that will check to see if we need to loop. And so what I'm going to say is the user correct? And I'll set that to false to start with. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come into a loop. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, is the user, well, I guess maybe a better word, we'll call this some type of check. And so if check is false, we want this to repeat. So I'm going to use a not check as my loop. So if we come in, if it's false, the opposite of false is true, and we'll repeat. So if it's false, we'll print correct, and then we'll end. But if this is true, we'll ask the user to make a guess. So we'll guess from the user. So we'll make that an input block. And then we'll check, does the guess equal our random number? If that's true, we'll make check equal true. If it's false, we'll ask, are they high? Is their number high? And if that's true, we'll tell them you're too high. And if it's false, we'll say you're too low. Sorry, my drawing's a little out here, but I just want to get all the looping in. And so this will come down, and the loop will end. And so all these come back to the loop here. And so if they get it right, we change our sentinel value to true. It comes through, and we'll print that they're correct, and the program will end. If they guess wrong, we'll see if they're high or low, and we'll print, hey, you're too high, or you're too low, and repeat back to the loop. And so this is kind of the logical structure we want our program to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to Eclipse here, and I'm going to start a new program. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to all my windows here so we can see everything in Eclipse, and then I'll jump back into Eclipse on its own. Apologize when I go to all windows because we get this infinity for a second here. But what we want to see here is I'm going to make a new project, new Java project, and this is going to be for the chapter 5. We'll use a Java environment And I like using use project folders as roots. It makes it easier to find my .java. And I'm going to finish. And I now have a chapter 5 in the list here. And I make a new class. And my class, I want to use, I'm going to use the default package for right now. And I'm going to call this guessing game. And I want to make sure I choose public static void, and I'll hit finish. And so I have the beginning of my guessing game. Let me make these windows larger. We'll want our, there we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to focus, sorry for the infinity, just on Eclipse so that we have this window here on its own. It's hopefully a little bit bigger on the screen. All right, one of the things that happens is when I have it set on a window like this, when I choose options, you don't always see the choice. I'll move this over. Since we're getting user content, I'm going to have to get scanner in my import. And now I'm going to initialize my variables. Now I'm not putting all the header information in on this as we normally would for a program because I'm just focusing on our logic right now. Initialize variables. So we're going to need a Boolean, which is our check. We're going to set it equal to false. The user is false before going into our loop. Then we're going to have an integer, which is going to be the number. And this needs to be a random number. Now, math.random only generates integers between 0 and 0.99. So I'm going to need to multiply this by 101 and add 0 to it. This was the algorithm that we had for generating these. And whatever number comes out of that, I want to turn into an integer. So this creates a random number between 0 and 0.999. By multiplying it by 101, I'm going to create a random number between 0 and 100.99. Or, yeah, 100.99. By turning it into an integer, it will cut off the decimal places. And so I have an integer from 0 to 100 inclusive. And then I'm going to need an integer for the user's guess. Now, right now, my Boolean check is a gatekeeper. And so now I want to start my loop. So while not check, because this will do what's inside of my code block when this conditional is true. And so my gatekeeper is false. The user has not entered correctly. And so I'm going to do a not check to make sure that the user is false, right? Because we want this to be true to repeat. So inside of here, oh, what else do I have to initialize? I almost forgot. I need my scanner object. We make so many of these that they're up in our initialization blocks here. Oops, make that a semicolon. So now I have a scanner object to get the user input, and I have all the things the program's going to use. So I'm going to system.out println guess a number between 0 and 100. And we're going to have their guess equal input dot next integer. All right, so we're good here on this level of what we're working with. So let me, all right. So we've got the user information. So what we want to see is if they're correct. So we're going to say if the guess is equal to our number. So this will be our blocks. Now, one of the things we have to watch in blocking like this is we want to keep our indentations and we want our braces to include blocks. So when I created my while statement here, it created the beginning and end. I want to make sure what's happening in the while loop happens between these blocks, because that's how the program is deciding what's within the while statement. Keeping things indented help us find these end blocks, and these end blocks have to line up. Notice how this end block lines up with the beginning of while, and this end block lines up with the beginning of the public static void. So we just want to keep some alignment here. So if this is true, we'll go system.out line, you are correct. We'll give some extra exclamation points. And now, because they're correct, their check is going to equal true. We now get a true check. But if they're not right, we have to do an else if. And our else if will say, is their guess less than the number that we had? And so notice my blocks ended up nicely. So I'll come here and do my print line, and I'll say, you guessed too low. Again, I'll put lots of exclamation points in. Now, I don't need to do anything else in this. I don't need to change the check or my sentinel value because we've already done, it's already false. They already haven't gotten it right. But I can do an else statement because if they're not low and if they're not equal, then they must be too high. So you guessed too high. Again, I'll put multiple exclamation points. And that should complete the logic of our code. So here we'll check their guess. Against the computer number. So when the while loop is over, so here is my end block for the while loop. So now I have, exited the while loop, and I've printed if they're right or wrong. So the only thing I need to do is close my scanner object. And so we have some short code that works its way through playing a guessing game. So let's see if our guessing game works. So trying to see what the to-do is here. That's just an auto-generated. All right. So let's see if this works. And we might need to peek in and tweak anything. So I want to make this larger so we can see our guessing game. So I'll run it. And it says guess a number between 0 and 100. So I'll go 45. I guessed too low. So I guess I'll try 55. I'm still too low. 75? Still too low. 85? Still too low. 95? Ooh, I'm too high. So I'm between 85 and 95. I'll try 90. No, between 85 and 90, 87. And it's correct. And the game has ended. I have nothing to enter. So they picked a random number. It was 87. And by looping, I could continue to interact with the program. Let's try again. I'll try 50. So 50 is too low. I'll try 75. That's too low. So I'll try 87. That's too low. 92. That's too low. 98, that's too high. 95, too high. And 93. Now I've got some big numbers. I'm going to keep running this to see if I get any smaller numbers. Let's do 50. Oh, 50 is too high, so I'll try 25. That's too high. 12, 18. So it works. We have a guessing game. The computer generates a random number, which we looked at before. And by having this loop, we can continue to interact with the computer without having to write a line of code for each interaction. In fact, we don't know how many guesses it will take for me to be correct, but by having a loop that keeps repeating the code, we get the ability to interact. And this is a game like my 5-year-old cousin would be okay playing, right? Probably 1 to 10 would be, or 0 to 10 would be better for them than 0 to 100, but the basics of the game are there. So, and this is a good example of how looping can make our program repetitively do things. And a while loop with a sentinel value sets up a nice little game for us here.